One of the things that Republicans and conservative media really talked up during the Trump era was how many union workers had voted for him both in 2016 and ultimately in 2020 again. There's a lot of talk about a new populist right and how there may be a different orientation towards unions and maybe not have just this knee-jerk like Koch mentality of union busting in every single instance. Well, now that Trump is gone, conservative media has instantly reverted back to their previous talking points. Let's throw this up here on the screen. It's from Philip Klein. He says, new post within hours of calling for unity, Biden smashes norms to reward big labor. Now, what is he talking about there? He's actually talking about something really positive that Biden did. And something that also was really widely expected. He fired the general counsel over at the National Labor Relations Board. That is the body that governs relationships between unions and between corporations. And during Republican administrations, including Donald Trump's administration, that body is staffed up with a lot of union busting attorneys and zealots whose sole goal is not to protect workers, but to try to smash unions in all the ways that they can. This general counsel that was fired, who refused to resign, by the way, so Biden had to fire him, was very much part of that ethos and mentality. Again, not a radical step, a relatively small but significant and important step. And it's just funny that conservative media immediately right back to the exact talking points that they've been using for years and years and years, ever since the Reagan era.
Yeah, I mean, nature is healing, Krystal. We're attacking unions now. It's like, yeah, like you said, where everyone's like, oh, 43% of union households voted for Trump. Me, great. You know, them. Oh, no, that's terrible. Also, who do you think has more support? You think it's big labor or the Koch brothers? Okay, I'm going to go with big labor. In fact, one of the ways that you can achieve unity is to demonize people who are against unions. I'd go ahead and say that. But, you know, a lot of these people haven't learned any lessons. They want to just roll the clock back. And it's kind of amazing. And it's actually, you know, look, I mean, this was my fear, and this is exactly what's going on, which is that the GOP has learned nothing. They will go right back, right to work, start supporting all this stuff, anti-union, even if they want to try and harvest their votes through culture war. They could get 20, maybe 30% more union votes if they wanted to. They could maybe even, you know, win a majority of union households if they wanted to by changing their position on it. But they're not. And meanwhile, I think that the consequences are pretty dire for union members and for workers all throughout America right now. And that's something that we also wanted to highlight and support here.
Yeah. And just to put a little bit more context here, unions have almost in history never been more popular and more broadly supported than they are right now. And I don't think that should be a surprise to people, because we've seen, especially during the pandemic, the way that employers can just treat their workers as disposable when you don't have a union and you don't have that solidarity and that bargaining power. So this is an incredibly important issue. It's something I really try, and we really try to highlight on this show, even though it doesn't get a lot of attention in the broader press, because ultimately, if you believe in a multiracial working class politics, like that doesn't happen without a labor movement. It's one of the only institutions in America where you have working class people coming together of all races and creeds and working together towards political goals. Having lived in states that had a really strong sort of union past in history and states that did not have that legacy and that union presence, it radically changes the politics and really makes the politics worse if you don't have that union history and presence on both sides of the aisle. So encouraging, and this is actually a big deal and something I've been following closely, Teamsters JC16 has been on strike. What are they asking for? Literally a dollar raise. Police have had a very aggressive response to their strike, arresting a lot of them and just really, you know, being sort of a lot more aggressive with them than, say, the rioters at the Capitol, for one example. AOC was out on the picket line yesterday, seizing the moment. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
But, you know, here's the thing about restaurants is that, and not all of them, but the ones I worked with, it was right to work. We couldn't have a union. Yeah. And so we had to experience things like being forced to punch out before your work is done. We had to be paid less than a living wage. Right. We got exposed to sexual harassment and other forms of harassment and degradation with no one to stick up for us. Yep. And so what changes that? A union changes that.
Yeah. Yes.
202 changes that.
Yeah, and listen, here's the thing. This is why it matters to have people in Congress who have a working class background, who know what it's like to be on your own and have zero union protection and know what a difference that ultimately can make. And sadly, I think one of the challenges actually on the left right now is because union density is so low after decades of sustained attacks from the right and Democrats basically abandoning unions since the Clinton era, is you have very few people who are in the younger generation that have a direct experience with union representation. So even though when you ask people, do you support unions? Yes, the level is very high. That sort of direct visceral connection and commitment at the center of the agenda isn't always there. So heartening to see AOC there. Again, I think it really shows the importance of having people with a actual working class background representing us in the halls of Congress.
100%. And look, I'm a strong supporter of unions because it's the ultimate check against oligarchic and even government power, which is go back and look at our history in terms of government abuses. It was many times it was union and union leaders who are ones being able to organize actual warm bodies in order to protest, in order to strike, in order to go up against overreaches and more. These are one of the few non-governmental institutions which can actually organize people across class and across race, across religion. It was one of the great gathering places in America for so much of our century. Right now, we have the lowest level of unionization, actually lower than when Herbert Hoover was president of the United States in the 1930s. And we should think long and hard about what that means to the destruction of our civic life and, more importantly, of worker power. An individual janitor or an individual worker has no ability to bargain their wage with the boss. Zero. They are completely left in the cold. Their only ability is in order to join a union, in order to use collective bargaining power, in order to try and, improve their station in life. And this, again, what I always say to conservatives, this is a conservative thing. This is a way in order to increase wages without having to set a wage. This is a way in order to allow people to govern themselves without having to step in and run the company for you. So in a way, it's actually it's really one of the ways that you can save American capitalism if you want to. But, since the Reagan era and more, we've just gone in such a terrible direction. And that's as you say, right and left, you abandon unions. And now we have the lowest level of unionization, wisps of what they once were. And we should remember that we have a very rich history of people standing up.
Yeah. And the enforcement tools have also been gutted and are rarely used. So companies feel like they can operate with impunity. The last piece we wanted to show you that I think is really significant is Instacart, which has really been a terrible actor throughout the pandemic, and workers have been organizing and protesting. They just fired all of their unionized workers. That was a small unit. It was just 10 workers who were unionized there. And this is part of a broader layoff of, I think, 1,900 of their part-time and full-time workers. But again, I can tell you, I've seen this so many times where workers get together, they organize, and then companies, and this is illegal, by the way, they retaliate. Sometimes they'll just close down the entire unit. These things are illegal, but they have to be enforced, and that enforcement hasn't been there at all. And when you have union density as low as it is, they feel free to operate with absolute impunity. And so that's what you see here with Instacart.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. It's terrible. I mean, they fired 1,900 workers conveniently, all 10 of the unionized employees were there. And it's a sad trend in American business.
All right, we're going to have more rising for you after this.